Welcome to my file for Enterprise. This is a basic walkthrough. There is going to be a lot more that we could deep dive into. I'll keep it fairly surface level, and we can deep dive in future videos or one-on-ones. On the dashboard you have a list of all of the recent places that you've been to, or you have shortcuts to. You can create shortcuts on many pages, meetings, profiles, etc. to get to them. You also have notifications and tasks that you have requiring your attention. If you click on those, it'll give you a breakdown of what they are and a link to jump directly to them. We'll also see that we've got 2 people that are on probation that we need to deal with, and we can jump to those also. And that is just a total of everything. Then we can jump across. We've got a list of tasks. If you're running the asset system, that this can be assets and people. If you're only running HR, it can be just HR people, or it can be a mixture of both depending on what your permissions are. Tasks are reasonably comprehensive. It allows you to have assignees. It allows you to have separate stakeholders that can view that are not responsible. They can be linked to a profile, whether that be an asset or an individual. We can also see tasks that we've assigned as well as that we are responsible to do. We can also filter by task or work order. If we were given work orders that we need to do, they will also be in here. Meetings can be a one-time event, like an executive meeting where we want to keep notes. They can also be a rolling meeting that go on indefinitely, allowing you to keep your agenda, meeting minutes, etc. Also tasks. So if we go into an agenda item, an executive meeting, we can have as a rolling meeting. We can have all of our agenda items and the text, the agenda text rather, and then over here we can have related items, which can be minutes, to do, task, PDF, external documents, images, or even forms from our form engine. If we then jump across to HR, in HR it's one of the larger modules. Again, you'll have most recent people that you've been on their profiles. You'll also have statuses of your threats, monitor status of threats. Some of those are monitor status expired, files without a date, and birthdays. From here we can also access a people report. From within people report you can add or remove columns as per your preference, and you can also download whatever is currently visible on the screen. So if you've already managed all your filters, or by text search, then whatever you download will be what is currently on the screen, columns and rows, and it will download as a CSV file. Onboarding will give you an overview of where all of your current onboardees are at. Once they're finished, you can mark them off as finished. Complete the onboarding, you can go to their profile, you can delete them out of the system if they no longer need to be there for whatever reason. These extra columns over here are user configurable, so you can have as many or as few columns in the onboarding report as you like. Roster. My file Enterprise is set up to be used with camps if you're running labour hire with remote workers. It's also set up to for worker to manage their own availability if you're dealing with contractors. You also have the ability to set them rosters, and it will total your cost for the period, and that again will be whatever's currently on the screen, and from here you can publish it to their profile so they can manage it manage their own access and so forth. We've also got timesheets, and we can manage our accommodation as well. If you want to talk more about accommodation, we can work on that. If you're managing assets is very much similar. There's a little bit less requirements in assets for obvious reasons. However, you do get your overview of your asset register. Again, you can turn on and off columns as required. We can also have components which become part of the assets. If you're running equipment, you may need components that go with that equipment or the assets. Just jump back to HR and to leave approvals. So with leave approvals, you can have as user configured, you can have as many or as few approvers for each item that needs approving. For argument's sake, with your leave request, you can have just a HR manager. It could be just the department manager that needs to mark it as sick. If they have to have a doctor's certificate, you will have a link here. Once that's finished, you click process, and that adds the leave to the leave ledger and adjusts their leave and marks the individual as not available on the roster. So after we go out of there, we can have departmental modules, finance, executive. They are specifically for finance and executive, like general manager, if he has to approve on new roles and things like that. Also, his access to the people's files with what permissions he has. We also have several other modules, training, HSE or incident management, businesses also, so your clients, your suppliers, and all the different sorts of business interactions you have. Each of those can have a profile also, and that allows you to manage contracts that are out of date and so forth. When we jump into a person's profile, first page is the feed, and that's all the most recent contacts you've had. Each of these items is date marked and timestamped with who did what. Details, basic details, and also extended details. Extended details is user configurable from the admin section, so you can have as many or as few different fields in there as you need. Contact information, that's pretty self-explanatory: phones, emails, addresses, emergency contacts. Requisites is what you require for that person, and this can be set at both the individual's level and at the role. So if the person is given a role, he can automatically take on the requirements of whatever any person in that role is expected to have. Files. We've got all of our files: driver's license, birth certificates, resumes, etc. And forms. So if we need to fill out an agreement, for example, vehicle use, we can give the person a form that we can create in our form wizard, and that can be sent to the person where they can fill it out and send it back. Once it's been completed, it will look very much like this, and then you've got your completed details, and you can convert it to a PDF for export for if you need it for any purpose that external to the system. Calendar will show where the person is, whether they're busy, whether they're available, what roles they've got, what accommodation they've got, etc. Any training they've got booked in, and so forth. Roles is simply their role, what they're employed as. They can have multiple roles. quite often you'll see people with a primary role and several secondary roles, or you might have a casual that can do several secondary roles and they don't have a primary role. If we click on that, we can adjust things at the role level. However, it will also pull through from the role template. Training, it'll tell you what that person's attained within your organisation, what they've attended but not yet competent, and any that they were required to attend and did not attend. It'll also show you what training sessions were deleted. So if someone was added to a training session and they were removed for that training session several times because they didn't turn up, it will actually take note of all that. So it will stop people that have friends as trainers from adjusting the records to make it look like they haven't turned up for training and so forth. Verification of competency is exactly what it says. There's a list of things that you're verified competent. There's a little bit more to this module, but for now we can just show that you can see what you're competent to do. Assets is the assets that you have assigned to you. That's fairly simple and straightforward, and you can then have job cards. These are all the jobs that I have done, which is related to work orders. This is only if you run the work order system. Audit will tell you pretty much everything that's happened with this profile recently over time. And contracts is a list of contracts that you run for that person. It's a new module that is in its infancy, but it's getting some really good results from certain people. With our all of our files, in our files we can set an expiry date and a monitor status on every file. Also, every time that this file is edited or modified, it will have a log of who did what just here. So you can always have a look at a file and see if someone's changed it, renamed it, changed the dates of when it's to be monitored or whether it's not to be monitored. You can delete an issue from here, and that is issues to the self-service module so that people can fill out the form if it was a form. We have quite a few options from within the files menu. You can obviously add PDFs and images, which is pretty standard, and our own forms, and then you've got also docs that we can create, placeholders. You can scan directly into the file system, and we can record voice record meetings. So if you need to record a disciplinary action or something, you can record it directly within their profile, and it sits in the profile just here so you can listen to it later on. Also down the bottom here, we've got the ability to invite people to the platform once you set up their profiles. You can send them messages, you can add tags. Tags are basically accessible through timesheets, rostering, also booking accommodation and so forth, so you can find people or group people in whichever way suits your organisation. We can add profile notes, which will add them to the feed, and we run a disciplinary action or performance management meeting for each individual. That is pretty much a good overview of a person. Once we look at settings, so as a stakeholder, as a super admin, I will get access to add myself to any of these areas. If I was just a regular stakeholder, a super admin would have to give me access to the different modules. Once we go into there, we can upload files for HR for use in forms. We have our form wizard, which I'll go into a little bit further. Processes, which are workflows that go with the forms to enable quite complex onboarding sequences. We've got a presentation creator, which will enables you to make basic slideshows that can go inside the form, so you can do inductions directly within the system. Groups are your basically your departments. In a lot of cases, we do have the ability to have functional and organizational groups. So for example, an audit committee. They're not really an organisational group, but they are grouped and they can have permissions. Requisites are all the requisites we need in our organisation, and then they get linked to the roles or directly into the profiles. Roles, pretty self-explanatory. They are all the roles that you employ generally. Within a role, we can set up what requisites that person or that role would need. What hours, if they have a standard hours. If they don't have standard hours, we can just leave that empty. And any extra details. The role rate, if we don't have a role rate here, it will pick it up from the award if it's in the award. Onboarding allows us to set up our systems of how we do our onboarding. Appraisals is, we can have several different appraisals, and it basically pre-templates out each new person's appraisal. So when a person starts with us, we can create a template here that can be automatically applied to their profile so that we don't have to manually create each meeting. And we can have different ones for different categories of people. And then we have a award interpreter where we can build our own awards. If you want to build it manually, you can build it manually, or you can use one of our predefined awards. In the forms, we have the ability to create our own forms. We can simply come into our form. On the summary, it allows us to tell people, tell the system whether it needs to have a header or a footer image. Show the form in the log, which is the contract. So if you want those contracts to show in the contract manager of the profile, that's how you make that work. Presentation is basically for if it is an induction or a short training session. We link the presentation to it. Can individuals or workers access this form from their self-service module? Yes or no here. So if we want like a leave form that they need to be able to start themselves, we would tick yes, and they'll be able to access it from the self-service module. A few other bits and pieces we can do in there as well. So when we go over to edit, this is quite important because this is probably one of the more common modules that people use. In our field parameters, for this a little bit like our form wizard. So we give it a nice short name for the question, give it a field type. We have quite a lot of field types. You can have drop down selects, multi-line, checkbox, so forth. We can also scan QR codes, take photos, either single photos or multiple photos, dates, input YouTube and content or contracts. If you've got a contract, it's got merge fields. And then we have a few other fields that make it a little bit easier to manage the process of creating our forms and what the forms can do and so forth. We can jump through the form. For instance, this one's a QR code scanner, so if we need to say do an inspection on a piece of equipment, we can scan what the equipment is. It's going to tell us straight away what it is, or we can use it as a proof that somebody was at a particular location, and then we can use dynamic codes to stop them faking that later. We can also preview what our form would look like, and when it's in preview mode, it'll always show that the form's completed. If we look at a different form, like an employee contract will be a little bit different, because over here on the left hand side we've actually got our WYSIWYG editor where we can put our text in, and including our merge fields, and they will merge with your role name and so forth. And up here we get a list of all the different merge fields that we've got available to us. That's a pretty good general overview of what the system can and can't do. There is a lot more that it does do, but this is pretty low level what it does do. And further information, get in contact with us and we'll show you through some further and show you what else we can do.